Hello, hi, thank you for tuning back in. My name is Ayub, I'm a driving instructor, and today I'll be discussing how examiners mark the test. Passing the driving test isn't as totally clear cut, and some people assume wrongly that they failed the driving test, and they assume a minor constitutes a major, or a major constitutes a minor. However, if you incorrectly assume that you failed your driving test, you will then go on to actually failing your driving test. There's many occasions where you can rescue your driving test, literally from the jaws of defeat, after making a fault on your driving test. The key to understand how your examiner marks your driving test is essentially the key to passing your driving test. Now, one of the key sort of situations that I find is when people make small mistakes, they then snowball into a larger mistake. Then the mistake becomes a serious, or then it potentially becomes a dangerous. So in this video, I'm going to discuss with you how examiners mark the test sheet. So I'm going to make it very simple. I'm going to make it very easy to understand. And then further down the line in a couple of other videos, I'm going to go into detail over each subject and go over it in graphic detail, so we all understand exactly what constitutes a fail, how it becomes a fail, and what are the reasons why it becomes a fail, and how to essentially rescue each and every concept. So the first thing that I'm going to discuss with you is failing your driving test because of your eyesight. Now, before you step foot into the vehicle, you need to be able to read a car registration number from 20 meters away. So you need to be able to read, for the sake of argument, we're outside Heaton Test Centre. I'm just going to take a picture here so you can see. And you need to be able to read the registration number from the top of the gate to the bottom of the car park. So some people assume that if you cannot read the registration number, you'll automatically fail your driving test. There's some truth in that. Essentially, the candidate has to be able to read the registration number from 20 meters away. If you cannot read the first number plate, another vehicle next to the vehicle, you'd be asked to read that one. Let's say the first one you can't focus for a couple of seconds, it's no big issue. You read the next one. If you cannot read the next one, then you'll read the one after. If you cannot read that number plate, you will then fail your driving test. So it'll constitute a serious or a major, however you want to interpret that. So you won't even be able to go for your driving test unless you can read the registration number. 20 meters is approximately 5 car lengths, depending on the size of the vehicle. If you, for that argument's sake, assume it's 2 bus lengths. So, in terms of faults, there's 3 types of faults. There's a minor, there's a serious, and then there's a dangerous. Where previously it was a minor, a major. So, in terms of making a mistake, if you make a serious mistake, you will instantly fail your driving test. If you make a dangerous mistake, you will instantly fail your driving test. However, if you receive more than 3 minors in one tick box, generally speaking, you will fail your driving test because it's a reoccurring consistent fault. You're permitted up to 15 minors, 1-5. So let's say, for example, you're travelling along the road and you're asked to take the next road on the left, and you signal, then check your mirror, and then you fix your positioning, everything else you do correctly, and you make your turn. You'll receive a minor because you were supposed to check your mirrors first and then signal, even though you did it reasonably safe. So let's say, for example, you were approaching the turn and you didn't see the cyclist on the left, that'd be serious. You'd fail your driving test, even though you managed to turn. Let's say the cyclist was in close proximity of your vehicle, you will then receive a dangerous, because you could have endangered his life or your own. You'd instantly fail your driving test. So in terms of, to help you understand and how to avoid failing your driving test, I'll look in detail how we're going to avoid these. So first of all, how many minors can I get in terms of passing a driving test? You can receive up to 15 minors and still pass. Only a major or a serious or a dangerous would fail your driving test. So let's say you get 3 minors and you get 1 serious, you will fail your driving test. Let's say you get 1 minor and you get a serious, you will fail your driving test. Let's say you get 1 dangerous, you will fail your driving test. However, if you get 14 minors, you will pass your driving test. However, if you are getting above 12 minors, generally speaking, you're a little unsafe on the road. It means your driving is borderline, and possibly within a year or two, you're going to have an accident. You're going to cause trouble. So it's important that you kind of look at your test pass, and if you are accumulate more than 12 minors, I would seriously consider taking a couple of lessons to kind of make sure your driving standard is good. Now, when you make a mistake, an examiner will class it as one of the following: a dangerous fault, a serious fault, and a driver fault. Sorry, Siri kicked in. So in terms of a driving test, it'll be classed, the examiner will class it as one of the 3. A dangerous fault. This involves actual danger to you, the examiner, the public or property. A serious fault, which is something that's potentially dangerous, so it leads up to the dangerous fault. Or a driver fault. A driver fault, this is potentially dangerous, but bearing in mind that if you keep making the same fault, it will then become a serious fault, which then becomes a fail, then it could potentially become a dangerous as well. Both dangerous and serious come under what people would normally refer to as major. And just one of these faults will result in an instant test fail. Although you'd be expected to continue the test normally at the discretion of the driving examiner. So what does that mean? It means pre-COVID, let's say your test was 40 minutes, you did a serious, but the examiner thought, look, they're okay. You do the whole test route and you'd come back to the test centre. Now, we have seen pupils that have failed their test and literally they park up. Yesterday, I was at Hetman White Test Centre, and somebody's pupil went for a driving test. The pupil moved off and literally parked up 15 seconds later. The reason for that, the blind spot wasn't checked when they moved off. Because the blind spot wasn't checked, the I think it was a JCB, a tractor. A tractor was going past the vehicle. She didn't see it. She pulled off. The examiner just pulled the car up, which you can understand why. The driving examiner is observing your driving standard. If within the first couple of minutes you're not making effective observations, then your standard of driving isn't really fit to be on the road, and you would need either further lessons or perhaps a bit more understanding of the dangers of the road. So now we're going to look at some common faults and what constitutes a failure. Some are clear cut, some are easy to understand, but ultimately it's up to the examiner's discretion to decide if a mistake constitutes a major fault. So not checking mirrors frequently enough. So not checking your mirrors in terms of observations before moving off, performing a manoeuvre, may only warrant a minor. So don't worry too much about it. But if your observations weren't clear enough, possibly it could become a major. So you're serious, I'm referring to as major, so it's simpler to understand. So like most minor slash versus major, it depends on the situation. Again, the examiner will determine whether the lack of observations made completing that particular maneuver or that instruction potentially dangerous to you, other drivers or pedestrians. To give you an example of that, let's say you're on the road and he asks, the examiner asks you to pull up on the left. They'll say, okay, thank you, move off when you're ready. So you've heard his instruction, you've looked in your right door mirror and you've moved off. Well, effective observations weren't really made. You didn't look over your left, you didn't look all the way to the right, signal if it was necessary, check your blind spot and then move off. So that would have been effective observations. However, if the road was empty, possibly get a minor. If there was a car close by, potentially fail your driving test. Another one is stalling the car. Now, in an automatic car, you're not too worried about stalling the car. But in a manual, possibly you could do. So it's one of the most common test mistakes that people make. Stalling a vehicle will make you feel that you've instantly ruined your chances of passing your driving test. However, it's just a minor fault. It's nothing major. But then again, it depends on the situation you're in. So if it happened while you attempted to start the car when you're parked, so let's say you've parked at the side of the road and he asks you to move off when you're ready, or when you're starting your driving test and you stall, it's no big deal. You're not affecting anybody. It shouldn't make an issue, shouldn't make a problem for anybody else. So it's no big issue. So once you've stalled, then you want to regain your composture. So apply the handbrake, electronic, flick the switch up. If it's manual, apply the handbrake. Calmly restart the car, take a big deep breath, check around, make sure it's safe, and avoid how you failed to move the car off. So if you come off the clutch too quick, come off it slower. If you've not got into biting point slow enough, do it slower. If you're giving gas, give it faster, give it slower. So avoid the situation you are in. Stalling is unlikely to warrant a fail, providing it doesn't happen in potentially dangerous situations. What does that mean to you? It means, let's say he asks you to move off outside the test centre. So you're outside Heaton Test Centre, Horses Test Centre, and it's fine. But then let's say you're outside Horses Test Centre, you're on low lane, and move off when you're ready. So you check your mirrors, you put your signal on, you're at biting point, you look in your right door mirror, there's a car approaching, he flashes you, you're sure that he's letting you out, you start moving, and he starts moving and you stall. Then you're going to have an issue. Or let's say at a roundabout, you're taking the second exit, you're going ahead, you start approaching the roundabout, there's cars behind you, there wasn't enough space to go, and then you found your gap and you started moving forward and you stall as you've come onto the roundabout. Well, once you've gone over the line and you haven't really made progress, you're in trouble. You will fail your driving test because potentially the car coming from that side, from your right, you're in his path and you've stalled. So if there's nobody there, you can start the car, move off, no big deal. But if there is a car there, you will fail your driving test. It'll constitute a series. Okay, so in terms of that's a busy junction. So if the junction is busy and you haven't found your biting point, or if you haven't found it and then you release your handbrake, the car rolls backward and you panic and you very quickly get into biting point and leave biting point and the car stalls, you will fail your driving test. So it's very important that you're aware of where your biting point is, how big your biting point is, how to accelerate, understand what rolling forward means, understand what rolling backwards means, understand by releasing the handbrake on a hill and not at biting point, the car will roll backwards. Understand that releasing your handbrake and not having biting point and you're on a descent, and then you're going downhill, the car will roll forward. Hesitation is another one. Hesitation in terms of if you're unsure of when to pull out at a junction or at a roundabout, you won't fail your driving test for not going at the first viable opportunity. So what does that mean to you and me? It means when you've approached the roundabout and the first gap that you saw and you didn't take the first gap, you won't fail your driving test. But in terms of you won't get a serious, you won't get a major. But if you constantly miss these opportunities to safely pull out when it's safe to do so, you will get a serious. Or if you think, oh my God, I need to move, and you haven't, and you move and it's not safe to move forward, again, you will fail your driving test. So it's very important that the gap that you find is a developing gap, and the gap has to be safe for you to take. So it's very important that when you're taking the gap has to be appropriate for your needs. It has to be appropriate for the direction you're going in, and it's got to be safe for you to emerge onto the roundabout. Another one is using the handbrake correctly. If you have auto hold in the car, I suggest you get used to it. If you have an electric handbrake in the car, get used to it. If you have a manual handbrake, get used to it. Now, I encourage pupils to use their foot brake, as in hill assist. I encourage my pupils to use the handbrake. I also encourage my pupils not to use it. So I need you, as a pupil, as a driver, to be able to cope in any situation. The safest thing to do when you're driving and you're pausing is don't feel that using the handbrake is imperative. However, it is a safe thing to do. Candidates often feel that they're penalised for not using the handbrake. You won't be. You don't have to use your handbrake while you're driving. So while you're stopped, you don't have to use your handbrake. It's not imperative to use at every opportunity. But each case is different. Depends where you are, depends what you're doing, depends where you're going, depends where you are, depends the hill that you're on, downhill, uphill, where you're going. Everything's subjective. So if you feel that the handbrake is going to help you, fine. If it doesn't, if you feel, well, look, it's hindering my progress, then don't use it. However, if you're driving with your handbrake on, that could potentially fail your driving test. So in terms of, let's say, for example, you don't want to use a handbrake because you're moving forward every couple of seconds. That's perfectly reasonable. We do that. So if you feel that, look, if I'm going to use a handbrake, I'm not going to make progress, fine. But if you roll backwards on your driving test for, let's say, a foot, which is about that big, about 12 inches. If you roll back, let's say, maybe 3 seconds, you'll fail your driving test. If there's a car behind you, his natural reaction is to horn at you. And if you're rolling backwards and you're unaware of it, you're going to be in trouble. So you won't fail your driving test for using the handbrake. You won't fail your driving test for not using the handbrake. You will fail your driving test if you are not driving safely. Another one is crossing hands while you're driving. Crossing your hands, as in steering like this sometimes, like this. It doesn't fail your driving test. I call it the octopus. It doesn't fail your driving test. As long as you're in control of the vehicle at all times, it's not an issue. So contrary to people's belief, crossing your hands will not fail your driving test. The examiners are looking for you to be in control of your car. So automatically, previously, you'll find that we used to teach the 10-2 position. So it was your hands like this on the steering wheel. We now teach lower down. Now, some people are aware, some people are not. So previously we used to teach the 10-2 position. So that was recommended, and it was like the appropriate sort of standard we taught. But with modern cars and airbags, we now teach the 3-9, so your hands opposite each other. There is a reason for that. It's if the airbags are deployed in your vehicle, so when this front airbag deploys and your hands are at 10-2, potentially you can end up hurting your arms, hurting your hands, when the airbag's deployed. So it's important that you're in good control of the steering, and your turning arc are consistent, they're smooth, and you're not unnecessarily moving to one side of the road or to the other side. So it's very important that when you're driving the car and you're turning left or right, that your turns are consistent, they're smooth, and they are where you want to send your car. Another question, or another reason why some people assume they failed their driving test, is driving too slowly. Now, naturally, examiners are looking for you to abide by the speed limit. So say the speed limit is 20 on that road, well, they're not going to expect you to be driving at 30. they certainly won't be expecting you to drive at 5 miles an hour unless the situation kind of encourages, or the situation arises where driving at 1 mile an hour is appropriate. So while candidates drive slower than needed in some places, they're convinced, in a bid to convince the driving examiner that they're driving safely, it's unnecessary. So you travel at a speed that's appropriate for the road and the conditions that you're in. So if the speed limit is 30 and you're doing 10 and there's a whole load of traffic behind you, and you can see in your rear view mirror and you can see behind there that there's lots of traffic, and you're travelling at 10 and the speed limit 30, well, that's wrong. Unless obviously there's a tractor, you can't get around him, a bus, you can't get around him, you're making an attempt but it's not safe, that's fine. So naturally, examiners are looking for you to be able to drive by the speed limit, up to the speed limit if necessary, and drive appropriately. So while candidates kind of drive slower than needed in a bid to convince the examiner of their safety credentials, going unnecessarily slow can result in a minor or even a major, so it could be a serious. If it endangers you or other drivers or causes significant delays. Now, what does that mean to you and me? It means, look, the road is a national speed limit, 60 miles an hour or 70 miles an hour, and you're toddling along at 45 miles an hour or 50 because you're scared to go over 50 miles an hour. You'll fail your driving test if the road is safe and you've got traffic accumulating behind you. So it's very important that you travel up to the speed limit if necessary. You travel at an appropriate speed for the conditions and the environment that you're in. So driving too slowly also signals to the examiner that you're not aware of the speed limit, which could lead to a fail. So speed up if you're lagging, but don't exceed the speed limit. So traveling at an appropriate speed is encouraged. Traveling at the speed that you think that you should be at. Let's say, for example, you're on a road with traffic calming measures. Traffic calming measures are the little pyramids, the little speed bumps in the road. So I call them pyramids sometimes because they're not round. Now let's say you're approaching and you're going 30 miles an hour, you see a speed bump and you slam the brakes on and you drop your speed down to 10, then accelerate again and then drop your speed. Well, that's unreasonable, it's unsafe. What you should be doing is travelling at an appropriate speed for the road and conditions that you're in. The speed limit of that road, let's say for example, is 30, but with the speed humps installed, it's a traffic calming measure, so it's reducing your speed. So if you don't understand what a reduced constant is, then perhaps you need further driving lessons, or you need to look up the word. So you need to find a safe speed that you're not constantly accelerating harshly and decelerating harshly. So maybe if it's a 30 zone and you're traveling over a speed up, maybe 15 to 20 is fine. But try and keep your speed constant, so you're not constantly slowing down, not constantly speeding up. So I've explained a couple of reasons why people would fail a driving test. Now, I will tell you as a pupil, as somebody watching this video, that it's not over till you come back. So as soon as you walk outside the test centre and you walk out with your examiner and you sit in the car and he tells you to move off when you're ready. Now, I have seen many good drivers fall apart. I've seen some very nervous drivers hold it together. Your first 15 minutes really negates whether you're going to pass your driving test or not. So if you can hold it together for 15 minutes, you'll pass. What you must do is remember that at the start of your driving test does not finish until you come back and you turn the engine off. When you turn the engine off, you've applied your handbrake, the car safely secured. He will tell you then, okay, park up over here and turn the engine off. Once you've done that, that's when you're being marked. So you can, I've seen some very good drivers fail their driving test coming back into the test centre, never mind the whole test route. So sometimes they've done the whole test route, they've realised they're coming back in at test centre, they've let the guard down. As they're travelling into Heaton test centre or Thornbury test centre or Hales test centre, they know they're coming back, they'll fail it there. So it's very important that you're on your guard from the very start of your driving test up to the very end. A couple of points I will add. The first point I'd like to add is people assume that their English is weak and that they won't pass the driving test. Examiners are very well trained. They will speak to you in English. They will speak to you in a manner that you will understand. So don't worry if your English is weak. The instructions are very clear. For example, at the end of the road, turn left. At the end of the road, turn right. Take the next road on the left. Park up on the left. Park up on the right. Drive into a bay on the left. Drive into a bay on the right. Reverse into a bay. Pretty straight, pretty straightforward. So you're not going to struggle. However, if there's any instruction that you don't understand, you ask your examiner. Just say, is it this road on here on the left? Is it that road on the right? You can also ask him while your sat-nav is running, say, is it this road over here? They do talk to you. They won't distract you, so they won't constantly talk to you, but they will talk to you. I'm going to go over the rest of the top 10, as they call them. I'm going to go over the top 10 in detail. However, I wanted to make this video so we could briefly understand how the marking system works. So hopefully, by the end of this video, you understand the difference between a minor, a serious, and a dangerous. Thank you for watching this video.